Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Natalie Portman. Seriously, there is no Todd and Wes. It's been her the whole time. She's just that good. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Calling Dr. Sunshine. Spend a Sunday afternoon with the funniest doctor in town. Go see Calling Dr. Sunshine. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We like to make things, get rejected by making those things as often as humanly possible. I often think about the process of being a creator, and we use that, experience in our life to obviously look at films and see what we can learn and appreciate them, adore them and shower them with our affections or rain down our anger, one or the other. You never know what you're going to get here. But that whole process of creation is hard. It's full of setbacks. And maybe one day we'll have a quote of the day from Jacob Riis, who has this wonderful quote that Greg Popovich likes to use when he's describing his philosophy, and he puts it up in his locker room, and it talks about a stonecutter and how if you watch him, he'll strike the stone 100 times, and then on 101st blow, it'll crack wide open, and he'll know that it wasn't that last blow that did it, but all the ones that came before. And it's like, this is the result of putting on all the work. And as artists, that's what we're dealing with here. It's like, no one cares about your first poem, but Walt Whitman, he creates notebooks probably full of bad poetry. And then we get, something beautiful and profound and speaks to the ages. Like, we're still quoting, Whitman today. Like, it still pops up in, whatever pop culture. And it's amazing. But you got to fill up your notebooks full of trash. And then even whenever you think you're getting to your good stuff, you're going to go through your rejections, and so that's part of it. And this is only pertinent because I was telling Todd off the air how I got a personalized rejection notice from a festival last night in the middle of watching our film this week. And it just made me sick to my stomach. They had some really nice things to say, and there's also big shrugs of like, we don't get it. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I don't expect this last project. It was very much, I'm going to swing for the fences and not explain myself. It was a bit David Lynchian in that way. Like, Lynch is like, hey, I don't need to explain anything. You get it or you don't. And if you don't, cool. Sometimes I don't get it either, and that's the way it is. Oh. Yeah, but that's how it goes, right? Like, you make things, and I think you said it well. Sometimes if you're doing it right, often you're making it for yourself. If you're making it for other people, you can try. Like, I'm not saying you need to make everything in a halo that is just for you, or a silo, I should say. But if you're doing it well, you can also pull and invite other like-minded people. And I think that's what art is. It's making something for you that's expressing something about you. And then you're crossing your fingers that other people see that and they see themselves in that as well. I don't know, but the process, man, the process.
I would say I'm glad you brought up Lynch. I feel like he would have liked your film.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought him up. Right. He right? Because it's so funny, in my feed when I go on Instagram, which is rare these days, honestly. Not rare, but like let often. I every now and then I get these little clips of Lynch reacting to things, and he's just an angry dude. You know what I mean? Like, he's like there was this one clip I just recently saw of him being mad that they only have 2 days in this one location. He's like, I don't want to work like this. I want to create something. 2 days. What am I going to effing do with 2 days? And he's like being angry because all he cares about is being creative and having the ability, being able to have the ability to do something that's not on the page, right? Or like try a new idea or something. That's what he does it for. And I think that obvious, one thing I was going to say before I even started, but then you brought up Lynch and it sidetracked me, was that I think that it's really easy, for someone, we look at someone like Lynch and we say, man, he is, the epitome of, I'm just going to make this and, the box office be damned. I'm going to make what I want to make. And I think that that's wonderful and great for a guy established like Lynch, right? But then we have us who we haven't had the success that Lynch has had. And so anytime you get a rejection or anytime you get feedback or something, it hurts, because you're thinking, I'm trying to take a step forward. I'm trying to put myself out there and I'm just wanting a little bit of reciprocation from the outside world, that I'm not alone in the way that I think. And I'm not alone in the way that I want to create this thing. And so when you get back something that doesn't align, then it feels like a step backwards. But I love that quote you were mentioning earlier. It's not a step backwards. It's a blow. It's a blow on the stone. And you got to keep, taking those blows, and eventually something will happen. You have to have that faith. But the other thing is that even if it didn't, it's still a life worth living, and it's still a beautiful thing because there's something else in the world that wasn't there before, and it's because of you, And I think that is such a beautiful thing. That's why I think Lynch would like your film.
Yeah.
It is unwavering, unforgiving. It doesn't provide all the information you need to put everything together. You have to participate in it, which we talk about all the time on this podcast, about how great films they're like books. They make you visualize, they make you put pieces together. They don't hand you everything. And I feel like your film does that really, really well. And, this festival didn't see it, but you sent me the feedback and it was so positive. Like, it was the nicest rejection. It really was, as somebody who gets rejected or has gotten rejected thousands of times, I would have been super happy with a rejection like this, So kudos to you for doing it, for putting it out there. I can't wait to see what happens next with it. And I can't wait to see what you make next. So
thanks, man. Yeah. And the trailer's in the show notes. We'll talk about it at the end, but we just released a trailer. And so, yeah, it's part of the game. You pay your dues and you take some swings. And I felt like, this was a moment for, let's really put people back on their heels a little bit. And I think historically there's been some projects that I've written that I didn't make out of fear. Someone was afraid of the words on the page, and that made me afraid of what I wrote, and I just backed away. And it's like, it's infectious. Fear is so infectious. And so this was one of those where I said, I don't care. It's scary. Some of the ideas are very scary. And if you're not going in assuming good things about where it's coming from, you will not be happy with me.
Yes.
But if you assume like there's a point and there's thought behind it, then you'll. And I don't think it's that hard to see that stuff. But in our culture, you just never know who's going to be watching something. The same people who, pretend to like complex food are the same people who eat Taco Bell every single day. It's like, hey, maybe don't shove that stuff down your face and you'll appreciate a really nice cooked homemade meal.
Well said.
Anyway, so with that in mind, I guess, what are we painting a picture of today, man?
Today, we are painting a picture of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which I think at this time it is streaming on Hulu, I believe. So if you haven't seen the film, please pause this episode and go watch it, because we're going to talk about all the things, spoil all the things. You know how it goes.
Yeah, we'll dive into a few things. I wasn't able to really organize my notes, and so I'll kind of just at one point start just bringing up moments and Todd will kick in or whatever. But broadly speaking, we'll touch on some of the cinematography, talk about broad lighting and portraits, as well as dive into story and writing. We'll talk about some of the restrictions, freezing time, the power of groups, Celine's writing process, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. On an isolated island in Brittany, at the end of the 18th century, a female painter is obliged to paint a wedding portrait for a young woman. Written and directed by Céline Sciamma, cinematography by Claire Mathon. It's featuring Noémie Merlant as Marianne, Adèle Haenel as Héloise, Luàna Bajrami as Sophie, and Valeria Golino as the mother.
Nicely done. Yeah, that's way better. You don't want me doing this.
I have the hardest job on this podcast,
Yeah,
let's just say.
I think it's become clear over recent weeks how badly I pronounce names. So, yeah, I was dying. I think I wanted to cover this one for two reasons. One, certainly I've always wanted to hear what your experience would be going through this, and I almost brought in Hannah. I almost invited Hannah on, or maybe one of the artists that I've interviewed for a story I've been working on. But ultimately, it wasn't out of I don't want those voices in here. It was more of just I am just so tired that I can't handle scheduling right now. The producer work takes a lot out of me. But then the other reason that I wanted to cover this was really, I have been wanting to force myself to watch it again. My first experience really laid me out. And I was just like, I can't go through that again. And then I was like, okay, if we got to cover it, then I got to watch it. And so I was like, okay, that's a good reason. So I don't know if this had any impact on you, if this was a Jacob Reese, stonecutter pounding the rock moment, or if this was just like, oh, that was interesting. Yeah. So tell me about your experience going through this world.
If I don't, this is one of those movies that it's so effective. It is like the reason why cinema exists.
Yes.
Right. I can't even think about it without getting emotional. Obviously, it's an emotional film, but just the idea, and it's not a new idea, it is new in that it's two women, but it's not a new idea of the star-crossed lovers situation, obviously, harken back to Romeo and Juliet or whatever, and to take it to the extreme.
Right.
But it is it's such a beautiful story in all the ways. The stillness, the silence that they sit in, the fact that there's zero music at any point, and you don't feel like you're missing anything. In fact, you feel like music would get in the way. So they're unafraid to leave it out. There are these the most delicate moments you could ever imagine, and then the most intense moments you can imagine, in a fledgling relationship that is like walking a tightrope at the beginning, and the editing is fantastic, and the directing is so fantastic in that you feel like at any moment either of them could fall on this tightrope, but they don't. They stay on it, and the movie takes forever to get them to a place where, well, first off, you sense this kind of, because I'd never seen this film before, so I didn't know what I was getting into. I kind of assumed about, I don't know, a quarter of the way in, oh, maybe this is a story of love between these two women. Oh, okay. And then I started seeing it blossom just in their faces, the moment where she asks her, where the painter is being asked, and I'm not gonna say names, where the painter is being asked if she's ever been in love before. I could tell that was a moment that was important, just from just from the way she's being asked and her response to being asked, in her faces, not even with the words. The acting is legendary. like, there is no actor. We are a voyeur in this relationship that feels almost like we shouldn't be there. Feels almost like, no, this is theirs. This belongs to them. What we need to get out of there, but we stay in it and make it uncomfortable. And there's a moment later on in the film where they're laying in bed, but I can't remember, but they're talking about how they feel like they wasted time. And I cannot tell you, like, that for me was the most impactful moment in the entire film for me, except for the ending.
Yeah.
Which was, because I've felt like that so much. Why didn't we just get to this and say what we wanted to say at the very beginning? We feel like that as a viewer too. Once we notice what's going on, which for a more astute viewer than myself would probably be earlier in the film. Once we notice what's going on, we're sitting there thinking, okay, well, let's make this happen. But we wait. And the mom has to leave for something to happen. And even then it like takes a bit. And it's like, you only have 5 days, and she's coming back. Oh, this is it. And we wait. And then it becomes so intense that we can't believe it's only been 5 days. It feels like a year, like they've been together for a year. And then it's so wonderful when she talks about seeing her twice. And the first time was in that painting, and she has the book page open to 28. I lost it.
Yeah.
I was like, and her reaction to seeing that, of smiling and being happy. She sees her little daughter in the painting, and she knows she's moved on in a way. She's made a life.
Yeah.
And you can see this delicate balance of happiness and sadness at the same time. She's so happy that she has created this beautiful thing of her daughter, but she's so heartbroken that it's not with her, that it has to be with somebody else. At the same time, you can see it. And I don't know if it's because of her reaction and her acting, or if it's because I'm superimposing what I would feel onto her. But I think that transparency in her performance is exactly what movies are freaking made for. Nothing is said, and everything is said at the same time. But you could put something onto that reaction, onto her acting, totally different or slightly different or the same as what I put on there. It's however you feel in that moment, which is beautiful, because that's what anybody would get about looking at art, a painting. What do you feel about that boat on the ocean? What do you feel about that sunset? What do you feel about that woman standing there with her daughter with a book in her hand? What I think she's feeling is this. Really, that's what I'm feeling. Oh my God, that is art. And then at the very end, where she says she never saw me, and we're zooming in on her across the theater. I know she's never going to look at me at the camera. I know it. She's already said she's not going to. She doesn't see me, and I'm looking at her from the perspective of I'm trying to do this without saying names, but yeah. I'm looking at her from the perspective of Marianne. So I know if she looks at me, she's looking at Marianne. So I know she's not going to look at me, but I want her to so bad. I just want her to glance over and smile, but she never does. She never does. And we sit with her for like 3 straight minutes, and she just destroys you with what you would hope, and it's absolute flawless ending to, honestly, a flawless movie. I give this movie a 10 out of 10 any day. I'm so mad at myself for waiting. It came out in 2019.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For waiting 6 years to see this movie. I'm an idiot. I feel like I've wasted 6 years. I've wasted time. I could have known this existed, or I could have known this feeling existed 6 years ago. So, I mean, it just goes to show you don't need CGI. You don't need a script. You don't need words. You just need honesty and truth and a scenario, and that's it.
And it's demanding of you, right? Like, you can't passively watch this. Not that it would even be possible because it's in French, but like it really demands your attention and rewards it, of course.
Yes, 100%. So I'm going to pause there because I know that this is a seminal movie for you probably, and I'm curious what you think. Yeah, here we go.
I'll try. Yeah, I think watching this was a revelation. It wasn't the first time I've come across Céline Sciamma. Like, I still haven't seen Water Lilies. I really need to go through her library. I want to say Girlhood was the first of hers that I saw. Yeah, and that would have been in 2014. I think Ryan Vaughn introduced me to that one. And so when Portrait came out, I was already familiar, and I liked Girlhood. There's like a lot of honesty in her work, and that was really loud in Girlhood. But for me, it didn't really punch me as hard as I wanted. And I was like, okay, this was good. This was interesting. And her approach is what I was in love with. Watching that film, I was like, man, her approach is it's a lot of what I want to do in my own kind of storytelling, which is be with people and watch them and how they move and interact through the world. And Girlhood is all of that. And so when Portrait landed, I was like, oh, yeah, I need to, come back to this storyteller. And I took longer, again, same thing as you. I took longer than I should have to sit down and watch it. I think knowing that it's in French and knowing it's a period piece, I was just like, okay, once you're so aware of those things, it becomes like, okay, I know I want to watch this. I know it's going to be high art and it's going to demand a lot from me. I need to carve out a moment in my life when I'm ready for this. And I just kind of kept waiting and waiting. Finally, I don't remember. It was just some night where I was like, you know what, screw it. Today sucks. I'm just going to watch something great. Because I'd just been hearing great things. Although part of me in my heart was just like, I don't see how it can be great. It's doesn't seem like it's just going to punch me in the face. But I'm going to sit and see what happens, see what it does to me. And I was pulled in pretty quick, but at the same time, it's so quiet and it's so observational that at some point you just kind of forget that you're watching a movie and you're just kind of just with these people. And I wasn't feeling like very strong emotions. And it was, again, to go back to the Jacob Riis quote, like it was like suddenly the rock just split open in me. I was just like, oh God, where did this come from? It's that moment you're talking about whenever you see the painting and you see the 28, all this built up well of emotions just floods out. And it's just like, I had no idea all this was within me this entire time. And it was just been slowly building. And this movie is so much of that. It's so much emotion that's held back, right? Because throughout the film, don't express, don't cry, don't laugh, don't smile, no music, don't go outside. Even the clothes are restrictive. Like you can just feel the air itself doesn't get to move, right? Like it's just full of that. And so whenever it finally does break, it's in these really interesting ways because the characters on screen are not breaking like you are. Like you are feeling everything they're not allowed to feel. Because even whenever they feel these moments, it's covered. It's consumed by sound around it. There's that moment whenever they have the fight because they know it's all coming to an end. And they cry at the ocean, surrounded right by the surf breaking. They can't even do that in open air. You know, you can't really even hear and experience that. It's only through being drowned out because their lives are being suffocated and drowned out. They're not allowed to have these moments of self-expression at all. Instead, it's all, stolen glances and under the cover of night. It's buried, in the final moment, right? She's weeping. And I love that moment because she's in the theater. She's going to hear the orchestra, which the beginning, right? She talks about like going to the orchestra and she's like, well, what's that like? She's like, I can't explain that to you. And she really took a moment too before she responded. She was like, let me think about this. yep, can't do it. Like, but what I can do is I can talk you through it. And right, she goes to the piano, and I love even the piano is covered. Even the piano can't be free. And she plays the keys underneath the covering. And she's explaining to it, it's a storm that's about to break. And it's the insects, that hear it. And then she just kind of walks her through it as best as she can. And then she forgets the music. She's like, I forget how it goes. And you can hear it. And we all know this song. It's such an incredibly famous song that we're like, no, it's the run. It's the run, the riff. And she botches it. And for me, watching that moment at the piano, I think that's the first time Héloise wants to kiss her. And I think that's so wonderful that later in the film, when she's talking about, I think you wanted to kiss me and whenever you're asking me if I'd experienced love. And I personally, and this is this interpretation, it's so wonderful we get to have our own moments here. Because I think that was her moment. Héloise kept a moment from Marianne just for herself. Even Marianne doesn't get this. This is just for me. Oh, and so at the end, she goes to the orchestra and they play the song that Marianne played for her. That's the song that she's listening to. And we watch Héloise remember and break apart under the comfort of being drowned out once again by men playing music, the music that they can't play. And she's remembering fondly and bitterly and accepting. There's so many emotions that we go with her through, and it just breaks us, remembering what she doesn't get to experience. And then all the while screaming at her, look, turn, just look. And she won't. Oh, there's so much here, man. And all those final 3 moments, just shatter me. And I was so frustrated yesterday because I had to pause the movie for like an hour and a half while I'm processing this rejection. Because at a certain point, I've had so many film festival rejections, you kind of get used to it. You never really 100% get used to it, but you move on pretty quick. It's like, okay, give me 10 minutes and, I'll flush this with the rest of the rejections. But this one, because it was personal. And it was just like, oh, I felt sick. I couldn't eat. I thought I was going to throw up a little bit. It was just, so I had to step away. And then when I came back, finally settled because I didn't want to bring any of that junk into the film. When I finally came back, hour and a half, 2 hours later, I was mad because I was getting towards the end of the film. I was so upset that I wasn't connecting. I was like, oh, I'm doubly mad at the festival rejection because I'm not getting to experience. And then she sees the 28 and I was like, nope, here we are. Wrecked me all over again. It was wonderful. It's wonderful to go into a movie and have someone pull all these emotions out of you. For characters you've never met or experienced, lives, I can't go with them in their life. I don't know what it's like to be gay in the 1700s. What do I know about any of that? And yet, here we are having a human moment. It's so wonderful that, to your point, this is what film is for. And I'm so glad you had that reaction because Céline Sciamma is kind of my goddess. She's up there for me, alongside Greta Gerwig, and doing what I want to be doing. And it's just so beautiful. She's doing it in a different way. And to me, in the perfect way of welcoming you into this world, even as much as she restricts you from it. Because there's so many gay films, and especially lesbian films, that, really take pleasure in inviting you into their intimate moments. We're going to see them have sex, and we're going to see and feel what they're feeling when they're going through that. And this does not invite you into those moments. And I think that's why this is my favorite, gay film, and a lesbian film that I've been waiting for. A film that matches the power of Call Me By Your Name and Moonlight. And I had felt none of the other, lesbian films that I'd watched matched it. There's some really wonderful films, of course, but none of them just knocked me down the way this one did. And I love that it saved that for their characters. Those women get to have that moment for themselves. And the moment that we see that moment beginning, we then transition to the morning after. That moment's for them. For us, how are they processing this afterwards? And there's nothing to process. That's so good. It's just like, that was great. And we're still here. We're still moving on with our lives. There's not even a conversation about it. And that's so good, because then, in fact, the thing that pulls them further is moving into a whole other element of what it means to be a woman, which is the abortion. Like, this sets up some other really dark stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I could ramble on for a good 45 more minutes here. But any of that striking you?
Yeah, man. We talk about, I don't know, I said it before, but we talk about films and like the reason why you have to have a reason, you have to have a statement to make. You have to have a reason why you're making something. You really do. And that reason could just be, I feel like making something. It doesn't have to be like a big statement, like, and this could be either of those things. It could be I'm making a statement, but because it's set, 200 years ago or whatever it is, that it could just be, I have this story that I want to tell, and I want to tell it in this specific way. And it honestly doesn't really matter. I think it was really smart to put it in, a couple hundred years ago where, maybe it wasn't as accepted as it is. And I'm not saying it's fully accepted to be lesbian today, but it's definitely, it has its challenges, but I think throughout history, this is probably the best time, to be gay that there ever has been. I would hope, well, maybe not right now with the current, but but so when they're having this discussion and when about why, Marianne's like angry at Héloise, for going and getting married. And she's like, what do you want me to do? How am I supposed to get out of this? Like it's the 1800s or 1700s. What am I supposed to do? Like, this is what happens to women at this time, and basically, like, I have to do it. And it's not, I don't want to do it, but I have to, so don't judge me, kind of thing. It was a different time. And so I think it was really smart to put the setting at that time as opposed to now, because we feel for her at that time. We know and understand that at that time it was, not only not accepted, but like you would either be completely shunned by society or you would be maybe even killed, depending on what the laws are at that time, wherever they are. And so you can see that it is impossible for them to be together. Whereas if it was set today, we might be thinking otherwise. So I think that was smart. Her ability, Celine's ability to put the characters in these scenarios where they can be silent and still communicate a lot is also really, really important, because it's very easy in a film like this, I think, for someone who's not ready for it to feel robbed of their time, right? You're sitting there in silence with people for a very long time. And then when they are saying something, you might miss it. There were several times where I had to like rewind a little bit, like, what'd she say? I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing or whatever. But every line is super important. Every single line is super important and says something. So you feel like if you're paying attention and you're reading, you feel like you are moving forward because every line is important and every line moves the story forward and every line has weight to it. So even though there's a lot of silence and there's a lot of vast swaths of just being in a space, you don't feel robbed of your time. You feel like, oh no, I needed to feel, in this space with her. They have a lot of time of really long shots of brush strokes on the canvas, that just, where they just sit there and they, for a good 40 seconds or 50 seconds, a minute, of her just doing that. And Nothing else is happening. You're just watching that. Nothing's being said. It's just her painting. It's very easy, I would think, to feel like it's like, well, why do we have to be there for a full minute? Well, we had to remind everybody like what she's actually supposed to be doing, and what she's there for, and show how difficult it actually is, not just physically, but emotionally for her to do this, because she knows when she's done, that's it. It's over. She's going to leave, and she doesn't want to leave because Marianne wants to be with Héloise. So, but the brilliance of Celine to put them in these scenarios where they can have that time to develop and breathe and make a statement without saying anything is really, really hard to do. At the same time, is like not making anybody feel like they're wasting their time, like the viewer feel like they're wasting their time.
Yeah, there's I ran across this BAFTA channel on YouTube where they have just guest lecturers come in and talk about all kinds of things, but they have a playlist full of screenwriters who came in, and the one I found was Tony Gilroy, and after finding and watching that, I was like, okay, well, who else has gone in and done a speech? And Céline Sciamma went in and did a lecture on her writing process. And for me, it was one of the greatest lectures I've seen. And just, it's hard for me to find practical writing advice. So much of it boils down into these kind of structural, useless things of like, well, in the first act, you want to set your whatever, your road trip begins, and you have your midpoint reversal, and it's just like, I don't know what to do with that. That's not helping me tell a story, bro. And so listening to her was one of the very few times I've ever heard someone talk about their actual process and what it actually looks like, not this idealized, revised history bullshit. And it was just so brilliant. And I'll link it in the show notes. And if you're a fan of this movie, you should go watch it, because she's literally talking about her process of writing and making this movie. But then if you're a writer, also worth your time, because, and I'll save 99% of it, but I'll just leave you, cue you into the thing that I really took away most was when she starts writing, she makes two lists, and she calls it, I think she calls it her passion list and her need list. And she'll start with her passion list. And when she calls it her passion list, this took me a little rewinding to understand, but it was referencing like, these are the reasons I'm making this movie. I'm so passionate about these things that I cannot wait to get on set and make this. And if any of these things go away, I can't make this movie because I just don't want to. And so like, what is going to drive me to be so excited to work on a project for 2 years plus, if you're including financing, you have to have a reason to get out of bed and make a thing. And this is my reason. This is my passion list. I freaking got to have it. And she talks about like an image of a woman rushing towards a cliff's edge. That's interesting. I want that. I want that image. A line of dialogue. Oh, I got to have this thing. I really want to hear someone say this line. And on and on. She'll just keep throwing ideas, thoughts, images, scenes that she just has to have. And she's excited, just super excited. Then she's like, okay, I have my 7 things. Here's my need list. The things that I want to tell this story about these 2 women who find passion and desire for each other. What do I need for that story to work? Okay, well, I need a scene where she approaches the house. Okay, I need that scene. I need a scene where she wins the commission, where she's finding out and pitching herself to be the one to win this commission. Okay, I need a scene where there's an abortion. Like, okay, that's a scene that I need, and I think it's important to have that kind of scene in this story about these 2 women in France in the 1700s. I also need a scene where the sitting woman sees her portrait for the first time, and so she'll just kind of keep listing all these things that make up the story, right? Then she's like, okay, now my trick is, how do I get it from the need list onto the passion list? How do I make this scene so important and so interesting to me that I have to have that too? And then she'll start thinking about how to make them powerful and interesting to her as a storyteller. And if it doesn't make it onto the passion list, it doesn't get made. It's so cool. And like her one example, well, she lists a bunch of them, and I'll save that for viewing. But the one of that was just so like, holy crap, I get exactly what you mean, was the abortion. She's like, okay, I need a scene, because this scene of having an abortion is really important to understanding women in this era. But what if she's holding a baby while she's getting an abortion? That I have to have. It speaks to so much. It says so much, and it's just an image. It's just an image. They don't say it for you. You either get it or you don't, but you're processing that as a viewer, watching that all unfold. And it's just like, oh God, yeah, okay. I get your process now. And that was just so inspiring, as a writer, to hear how she works through her story ideas. That I'm like, okay, I get what you're doing. Even if I can't do it as well as you can, I at least have a framework that is really inspiring and informative. Yeah. So highly recommend going and listening to her lecture series. I'll link it in the show notes, but it goes to exactly what you were saying, Todd, about we're watching these women say nothing, and yet it's so full of life and thought, and you get so much out of it. And she's just constantly doing that. Yeah. Like, even I can imagine her going through, and I think part of my fun of watching this was like, what did she do in this scene that moved it from the need to the passion list? And I think like some of those moments that she didn't talk about in the lecture was like the paint on her hand. Whenever she goes down to get a glass of water and she's drinking water, and suddenly Héloise comes in, she hides her hand. It's so good, because now there's this whole dynamic happening in the scene as they're having this very simple conversation. It's like, it's emblematic, right, of her hiding who she is truly and what she's here to do truly from Héloise. And it's just full of like, is she going to catch her? Is she going to admit it? Is she going to let her see it? There's so many thoughts and things as you're listening to this surface level conversation happening. Oh God, that's cool. It's so cool, man.
Dude, that's a brilliant way of looking at it. Like, because I think as creators or as creative people, that you have a lot of possibilities, and it's almost like paralyzing to make a decision to include something or not include something. Or what if I go down this road? Well, when you have like 100 different directions you could take, and let's be honest, unless you're narrowing down, you're not going to take any of them. So asking yourself, what's important? What do I want to say? Okay. Then going in and saying, okay, how do I make this as important of a moment as possible, where I have to make it, or else I'm not making the movie. I mean, yeah, then you have a series of things that only matter, that like are all vital to your process of making it. And how fun would that be to go in knowing every single scene that you're going to film is so vital to to what you're creating every single day. Like that's a dream, and you've manifested it yourself. You've created it yourself through this process. That's so brilliant.
So brilliant.
Wow.
God.
Yeah.
I'll run through the rest of my notes here. It's scattershot, so forgive me. The one thing that I did have was like cinematography. The camera work is so lovely. It feels like we're watching a series of portraits, right? They're very still frames and combined with very precise movements. And they pick their moments of when to really add life to the frame. But for the most part, and then the lighting, it's so often said that the best lighting is backlighting, right? Like, you want your shadows to fall towards the camera, not away from the camera. And therefore you want this upstage lighting, right? You light the short side. And so if you think of like a portrait of someone staring straight at you, right? There's no broad or short side of the face. They're both even. Now, if the person looks slightly one direction, suddenly you have a broad side and a short side, right? The broad side is so much of the face being exposed to the camera. The short side is what you can barely see, right? It's being blocked off by the broad side of the face. And so normally you want to light the short side to add texture and dimension to the broad side. And that gives a lot of depth to your image. And here there's so much broad lighting that it's still beautiful. And this is a great case study. If someone says, it's always ugly, right? To lighten this fashion. It's like, well, hold on, go watch Portrait, because there's so many scenes that are very broad lighting. And I think it's wonderful. Like it's pulling you into the world, and I think it's adding a lot of dimension and maybe also telling of portraits in general and the history of portrait work. Anyway, that was about the extent, I think, of my camera and cinematography stuff. We'll see if there's anything else buried here in my list of scattershot notes. The beginning, and we'll start literally, this is in sequence. We'll start at the beginning. I love that we see the portrait of the lady on fire at the very beginning and never again. Like, it's one of those things at a certain point you're anticipating, and then you just kind of forget that it exists. And I also love that it's the title is Of a Lady on Fire, which is ripe with, sexist tones and place, knowing your place in society, right? What is a lady? All those kinds of elements. It's not Portrait of a Woman on Fire, right? And so that's just beautiful. And I also love, and the reason why I love that we don't see it again is because it implies to me on second viewing that it's a moment Marianne never forgot, and she painted it from memory, and it stuck with her, because Héloise says, I think you're going to think of me so often, and whenever you do, you're going to think of that portrait. And she's talking about the one that she painted for her future husband, right? The Milanese man, when in reality, what she remembers is that moment of her by the fire being lit. And that's a really different, lasting impression than what even Héloise thinks. And Héloise's mind,
and that moment was really cool too, because I knew what was coming. I knew this was the moment. They're standing by a fire. She's wearing that dress. Like, I kind of like, well, I didn't know it, but I assumed that would come. But she's on fire, and Marianne doesn't do anything, and Héloise doesn't do anything. She sees that she's on fire and does nothing about it. She just stands there. And then another woman comes and like puts it out. She falls on the ground. Like, that says a lot. She's like, I don't care. She just was very apathetic about it.
Absolutely. I'll come back to that in a second because it's such a wonderful moment. But at the beginning, I also love that Marianne is being painted. She's sitting for a portrait for her students. She's teaching other women a craft, which is very cool. And also very thoughtful about passing on legacy and trying to uplift other women. And it's super subtle, of course. But I think this movie is her portrait, right? We're watching Marianne as she's kind of moving through these moments of discovering love and passion. And this film, is a series of those images and paintings, of course. And I love that there is no segue into her story. We jump straight into the water, rowing to the house. That's so cool. There's no it all began. Like, none of that stuff. Like, nope, we're going straight into her memory. Freaking amazing. And I love that she unpacks the canvas, right? She dives into the water, and she talks about that during her lecture. But she dives into the water to retrieve her canvases, which is a powerful moment. And when she unpacks it, they're wet, and she sets them by the fire after she herself had already stripped, and she's naked. She's warming by the fire. And I think that's this beautiful visual simile, maybe, of, an unpainted canvas is like being naked. It's waiting for something. It's waiting to be warmed with an image. And in this case, it'll be the image of Héloise. And the setup is really, really great. There's this image that were painted from Sophia. Is it Sophie or Sophia? Or I think it's Sophie. Sophie. Yeah, Sophie. And so Sophie is describing what happened to Héloise's sister. She jumped off the cliffs and killed herself. Why do you think she killed herself? She didn't scream. Oh, that's powerful image in your head. And I love so much of this movie is putting images into your head. Think about that while watching this movie, about what's being implanted into your mind. Same as a portrait, same as what Marianne is experiencing. And I love that. Maybe she didn't want to marry a stranger by arrangement either. And so the very first time that we meet Héloise, I love that we don't see her face until after she charges the cliff. We couldn't see her until we saw beneath the surface. Like, that's a reveal. Like, she's only revealing her face because she's revealed an impulse, a feeling, this pent up thing that she's had in her. She said, I've wanted to do that for years. And so there's all these things kind of pent up in these women. And then there's this moment, oh my God, when Marianne is talking to Héloise's mom, and she makes this joke, and Héloise says, the mother makes the joke about, I'll give you another assignment after this. My friend, that'll be hard. She's ugly. And she starts laughing at her own joke, right? It's so good. And she says, oh, thank you for that. You made me laugh. And Marianne's like, I didn't do anything. You're here. It takes two to laugh. You cannot laugh alone. You cannot love alone. And she also, the mother, took two sisters away from each other where they could have no laughter, they could have no love. No wonder the other sister killed herself. What did she have? And it's very powerful, like very subtle again, implanting and inserting things into our minds. And oh man, gosh, there's this beautiful moment where Marianne burns the first artist painting, and she sets Héloise's heart on fire first. She sets the candle on her chest, and it's like watching her heart be on fire. And it's just emblematic, it's so much. Oh, dude. And then
I didn't notice about the heart, like this, where she lights it on fire. I thought it was an accident. And she was setting her own painting on fire, and then they pull back, and I realized, oh, it's the other painting. Okay, got it.
Oh,
yeah.
And then she tosses it into that was stressful.
Yeah.
And then I love that they have this conversation about painting, and Héloise is like getting into her. She's like, I'm interested in you. Have you painted nude women? She's like, yeah. Have you painted nude men? She's like, no, not nude men. She's like, oh, is that for modesty reasons? Oh, she's like, oh, no. They don't want us to paint men because they want to prevent us from doing great work. And this is a very layered thought. Again, everything's in layers in this movie. In order to capture men well, you have to understand their anatomy, right? This is what Da Vinci did so well. Like, he really studied anatomy. So you got to paint naked people to understand like the bone structure. How do the bones sit, and how does the muscle sit on the bones, and like all of that stuff. That's why he was so incredible at medical stuff. Like, Da Vinci called out things that we wouldn't discover for hundreds of years. Like recently in the 70s, they discovered what Da Vinci was able to surmise about the interior of the heart and how the interior of the heart chamber works. Something that you cannot discover through dissection. You have to analyze it through other means. And he was able to figure out because of how well he understood anatomy and the way his brain worked. He was just one of the most smartest person to ever walk the planet, bar none. You might put him above Einstein, and obviously that guy knew a thing or two. But anatomy is so important. So she understood if you will withhold the anatomy of men, then you cannot paint their accomplishments, or more important, social, historical work, because men are the ones who are making those achievements and advancements, not women. And so it's a very interesting thing that they withhold nude men. not for modesty reasons, but to hold back women from saying anything great. Whoa. Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's that story, Orpheus and Eurydice. I don't know how to pronounce that, obviously. I can barely say my own name. Eurydice? Eurydice? Yeah. Eurydice. Sure. Yeah. And so she reads that story. They're sitting around the fire and they're reading. And she finishes, that moment, and we hear Sophie object. And this is such a wonderful sequence. Sophie objects and she says, he's a fool. That poor girl. She's identifying with the woman losing her life because a man couldn't not look, which is already a great layer of talking about the male gaze and the way men used women for a very specific purpose. They're there as ornamentation, not to live their lives. So that's already on its own a wonderful statement coming out of this story that Sophie, even at her young age, understands about the world. And that's layered in. Again, it's kind of touched on, but not really. The depths that she's really getting to are really not shouted out loud. That's for the viewer to parse. And then Marianne steps in. She's like, well, actually, maybe he made a choice. He chose the memory of her. He made the choice of a poet, not the choice of a lover.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is great. What a wonderful perspective coming from an artist. And then we get a third one. We get, what does Héloise think? She says, perhaps she was the one who said, turn around. Oh, because obviously Héloise being in the same position of being taken away by a man is saying maybe there's a choice being made here of choosing death over choosing a life that she didn't want. Mm-hmm. Oh, mm-hmm. And that whole scene is just so wonderfully structured. It's very succinct and pointed and layered for the thoughtful. Again, like you have to pull, like you can get some of that on, just first thought, but the more you think about it, the more it grows and the bigger the conversation becomes about what each woman there is seeing in their own life reflected in that story, their own futures. And then what you pull away from that. God, there's just so much. There's so much in there. Oh, and so we move from that scene to the sequence of the fire, right? And they go to visit the woman who is helping with the abortion, and kicks off that powerful song. And this just calls back to what we were talking about last week with the fall, about the power of choreography and combining, voices and movement. And here, we're standing around this fire and the women start singing, and it's so powerful for so many reasons. One, it's just powerful on its own. If nothing else happened in that scene, my God, it just floors you after this so long of silence. And then it's suddenly filled up with, 20 women singing at once, in unison and in rhythm. And it's so wonderful also because Héloise had never heard an orchestra. And Marianne couldn't describe it. So this was her first orchestra. Women coming together, powerfully singing. Also in support of this younger woman who's getting an abortion. It's all in support of each other. God. And then we see her dress catch fire. And this is really powerful coming off the moment of that story about Marianne making an observation about choice, because she chooses, to your point, she chooses to not put it out. And that's just another layer in there of like the power of choice and choosing your destiny. And of course, this moment leads directly to their first kiss under the rocks. Choosing each other, choosing to be vulnerable and uncovering themselves. I love those. It's just beautiful decoration or wardrobe. And I love it gives them a choice to make by removing that and being vulnerable and confessing to what they want with each other. God. But also, I think it's on purpose because this is the shore where her sister killed herself. having that moment of choice happen on the moment of her choice. Very powerful layers happening in this story. The more you think about it, the more you suss it out, like where are things happening, what are people doing, why are they doing it, why this now, why this moment, and it's just sequenced in a way that's just giving you so much to feel and think about.
I think that this because the movie moves so slowly and it's so delicate, it's easy to, on first viewing, think that there are moments that don't need to be there, but every single moment is important. And I think on second viewing, you could probably see that, and which is incredible for a movie that moves this slowly and is this quiet and delicate to be the case. There's the what was it? There was the well, I mean, you just described many moments there that are vital, and there's no how do I say it? If they were removed, you wouldn't necessarily know it, but because they're there, the beats that happen after are so much more important. And it's just kind of crazy how a movie like this begs you to watch it again. I mean, I've seen, there are other movies that we've covered on this podcast, like Call Me by Your Name and stuff that are fantastic, but I don't necessarily have like the pull to go back and rewatch it almost immediately again. Because I think there are moments that maybe, in some other films that, could be maybe it could be cut or it could be shortened or something, and I wouldn't necessarily feel like anything was taken from me. But I don't feel like that in this film. Like every single moment feels important, even the ones that you might think on first viewing feel long or drawn out. They're there for a reason. Every word that's said is important. The way I love that you call out during their first kiss when they pull down their face masks or their scarves to make that decision. It's vital. Every word that's said in the moment where that was what I was going to say, in the moment, the abortion scene where Marianne looks away, and she. Héloise, Héloise tells Marianne to watch. And I think that is super powerful because Héloise knows what the world is like, even though she's, rich and sheltered, I guess, in a way. She is pulled into a different type of world than Marianne is. And she wants Marianne to understand that a little bit more, and so she's the one who tells Marianne to watch this happen. Yeah. Like that didn't have to happen. You know what I mean? Like even by having that scene, which is as powerful as it was, even having the baby next to her on that bed, and how heartbreaking that is, to have that little moment of Héloise telling Marianne to watch, it didn't have to happen, but because it did, it just kind of shows you a little of the separation of their lives and how that's starting to overlap. They're trying to overlap those their lives and experiences a little bit more there. It's Héloise caring for Marianne to bring her towards her, and Marianne caring for Héloise by watching, anyway. Keep going.
So good. Towards the end, I love the contrast because Héloise cannot stop smiling. And it's so good from how we found her, right? She couldn't smile, couldn't crack the best joke in the world wasn't going to get her to smile. She only responded with anger. And now here she is sitting and doing the thing that no one else could get her to do, and also smiling while doing it. Like, wow. Sophie, oh my God. Sophie at the end has been knitting this panel, right, of the flowers. And I love at the end, the flowers are dead, but in her needlework, right, they are still alive and beautiful. And that has a lot to say about their relationship, right? Emblematic of their love and maybe all love and all memories, and just the power of a portrait that can keep that thing alive forever. Their love will last forever. So amazing. And so, yeah, I think the only last thing that I have is at the end, Héloise goes to the orchestra and hears the music. I love that she's by herself.
I was love that you're calling that out. I was going to say that too. But yes.
She goes, and I feel like it's another layer of she knew this was going to be a moment for her. She didn't bring her husband not because she's alone, because this was her moment to be consoled, as she puts it earlier in the film, and then a moment just for her, in her memories. Yeah. For her, I think she's going to the orchestra feels like she's going with Marianne in the first place. She doesn't need to look. Marianne is already there. Oh,
yeah. So good.
Oh, rocked my world, bro. That's all I got. Yeah, go for it.
No, I don't have anything else. I think that we talked about all of at least like the really big moments in it, and just how, masterfully crafted this entire story and film in general really is, from the script to the cinematography to the editing, to the story itself, to the settings. It's just, to the scenes, to the wardrobe. I mean, to the acting. There is no acting in this movie. Yeah. This is just truth. And it's, like I said before, I just really feel like movies are made for this. Like, this is the reason why. It's complete honesty in every sense of the word. On a subject that, like, I wasn't ready for. I don't look for that. It's not something that affects me personally, and yet I feel affected by it because of this story. So I think it did its job. It did it for sure. And it's not as gutting as it is. I think it's so successful for me, and it's probably in my top 10, honestly. Like, the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more we analyze it, the more I think about, wow, this was such a gut-wrenching movie in so many ways, and not a lot happens, and yet I kind of can't wait to watch it again. How is that possible? Like, normally movies like this, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I can't, I gotta take a step back. But no, I feel like almost like it's these characters have their own silent victory. Particularly Héloise, who, like, okay, Marianne, she has this experience with Héloise and she moves on with her life, right? But Héloise has to get married to this other guy whom she doesn't love, but it's just what has to happen in her life, right? And now she has a daughter because of it. So she, whom obviously she loves, goes without saying, and so she's happy that happened. So through the trauma of having to go get married to this guy, this beautiful thing happens, and so she's having to live out her life. So for her specifically, there is this little victory that she has to hold on to. Marianne, so Héloise never sees Marianne again. Mm-hmm. Marianne gets to see Héloise twice. So Héloise is living in this world where Marianne doesn't exist anymore. But Marianne is living in a world where Héloise does. She gets to see her multiple times. So there's this win that Héloise gets, this victory through the past experience, not the present experience, but the past experience of this love that she has. And she's continuing to pull it with her by going to see the orchestra, by being painted and revealing the page 28 in the painting. She's living this herself, and it's just this, I don't know, this absolute beautiful story. And I love that all that to say, I love that it ends with her. and her experiencing that through her life. Like she's experiencing her love for Marianne through her current life, not like she's dragging Marianne's memory along with her. You know what I mean? Like forever and always, with nothing to prop it up other than her love. That's the best way to say it, right?
That's so good.
At least Marianne gets to see her. So
yeah. And as you were talking and describing, you know, the final moment, like it also is creates a really nice first frame, last frame. The first frame is a blank canvas. The last frame is a close-up portrait of her from Marianne's point of view. So it's like she's filled this canvas up with her. And that was her final, you know, portrait of her.
Great point.
God,
Great point.
So good.
Oh my God. The first and last frame.
Oh,
God damn it. Like,
and then on top of that, you know, I love just another layer of choice. They both choose this ending. They both choose this ending whenever Marianne chooses to finish and complete the painting and not burn it. And obviously Héloise chooses to not kill herself, but to put her hands in Marianne's fate. I mean, she asks her point blank, do you want me to? Like you expect me to, but are you asking me to? No? Okay. That's my future. Here we go. Like, I don't know. There's so much to pull apart. And I think you're right. It does make me want to go back, watch it again, just to see what else is
take a break
in there.
Take a break, Wes. Take a break.
Fair point.
This is coming from a friend. Take a break. Give it a week. Okay.
Oh, dude. Well freaking done, man. What are you going to recommend this week?
I started watching this yesterday just because my in-laws are in town and we were, you know, like just chilling around the house on a lazy Saturday. And I just put on 0 Day on Netflix with Robert De Niro, who he executive produced, by the way. And it's fantastic. It's got a crazy great cast. Jesse Plemons is in it. And it's like, I don't know. I'm watching it and I'm thinking, oh, this is okay. So it's a series, which I was not excited about. I'm just not into series right now. I mean, I kind of am. I'm watching a few, you know, I'm watching Severance. I'm watching, you know, The Pit and stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, just give me a movie. I just want a movie. But I put it on and, you know, said time be damned, because we were just looking for something to watch. And it's really engaging and interesting, and you don't know really what's happening, and it's shot beautifully. The production on it is fantastic, which I wasn't expecting, honestly. It's like a step above what I normally would expect from a straight Netflix production. So maybe I'm not sure, but yeah, I really am enjoying it. I got 2 more episodes to go to finish the series, but yeah, it's I think it's a limited series, so maybe there's only 1 season. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's really engaging and really good.
Nice. I was debating that one, so I'll cue that one up too. Then, well done. Yeah. I'm going to recommend a movie called Love Song. If you're looking for another really wonderful or beautiful portrait of 2 women, and yeah, I'll just say it has Riley Keough and Jenna Malone, and one of the best child performances ever. Like, it's just so good. Great directing. Yeah, so I highly recommend that if you're looking for something else in this vein. Stay tuned for next week. We take a breather and we watch Ocean's 11.
Nice.
Yeah, maybe we can like chill a little bit. My nerves are shot. My nerves are done. So we'll look at who is that? Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and the Clooney from Soderbergh. So if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to talk about or cover, kind of things you find interesting. Shout out to Uva, who dropped a lovely note, in last week's The Cells episode, as well as I've been getting some love from like Charlie, and Seth, and like so many people have been reaching out and saying very nice, kind things. So appreciate all of you fine folks. And if you want to comment on this episode in particular, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/portrait of a lady on fire.
And our quote of the day is from the great Virginia Woolf. Women have served all these centuries as looking glasses, possessing the magic and delicious power of reflecting the figure of a man at twice its natural size. Wow.
That's from A Room of One's Own. I read that, a few months ago for the first time and was obviously floored. If you've read that book, like it's just an incredibly powerful work. There's some things that she called out 100 years ago that's just happening right on cue, just as she said. And it's really, really amazing. I mean, it's not like 200 pages of her predicting the future, don't get me wrong, but there's like a couple sentences here and there that was just like, whoa, I can't believe how well she called that out. And God, if that doesn't say so much, about women's place through history, and obviously speaks to these women in portrait. But it's also interesting. I was recently reading about ancient Egypt and how much equality there actually was back in ancient Egypt. Like, it wasn't too dissimilar from today. Like, women were allowed to own land, have jobs, they could file for divorce. Like, it really wasn't. Now, men still mostly had, more power overall, but it was not too dissimilar from today, and from the way it sounds, from what I've read. And that just blew me away. And it just started, from what I understand, again, from their religion. Like, part of their belief system was about balance, and that influenced and permeated how they treated their culture and society, and they were looking for balance, and a natural outgrowth of that was giving equality, to women. And so I think that's
except for all the slave stuff. Yeah. Cool.
Not balance for them, for real people. Todd.
Dear God. Oh man. Wow. Yeah. Amazing.
So hopefully, man,
awesome.
I don't know. Hopefully, we have plenty of LG listeners out there, and hopefully, we did it justice to guys talking about their experience watching a lesbian film. It's fun, and I think that kind of thing is important. It would be a very dull, lifeless world if the only people who talked about a thing were the people who were represented by the thing itself. Like, we need, all kinds of people discussing all kinds of work. And so hopefully we did some modicum of justice to such an incredible film. And I think you're right. This is why movies exist.
Yeah. End of statement. Thank you guys for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I adored talking about this with you, Wes. Super insightful. Thank you for all your notes. If you liked this, please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcast, share us with your friend. It all helps a lot. And if there's a film you'd like to see us talk about, pick apart, please share it. Who knows? One day, maybe we'll cover it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
Oh, right. I almost, whenever I was listening to you at the beginning, I was like, I'm very tempted to just sit and ask you questions for the next 45 minutes. I was like,
really?
Yeah, I was like, and? Oh, so good.
I do. Well, probably just because you were happy that I liked it.
Yeah.
Because you knew you loved it beforehand.
Yeah, but hearing everything you were saying was just so good. Oh man.
Oh, thanks, man.
One of my favorite episodes.
It's just I mean, this, I did not expect. I don't know. I just didn't expect it to be so good. I honestly didn't. I expected it to be good. Mm-hmm. I think that movies like this are, usually good, but I didn't. I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't expect it, man. I really didn't. And then I absolutely fell in love with it, and the characters and Sophie and like what they went through and what they were about to go through. I love that there wasn't a single man in the entire thing. Well, other than the guys rowing the boat, and then the one guy sitting in the kitchen. There's like not a single man in the entire thing, and I just love that. Like there doesn't need to be, there shouldn't be. There's talk of them, but almost like they don't exist, right?
Yeah.
And I just loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant and simple, right? Simple and yet so complex at the same time. So yeah, this is one of my favorite episodes. Honestly, I just totally adore this movie. It's going in the Rolodex.
Yeah,
for sure. Portrait of a Lady on Fire.